Hello, everyone, and good morning, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is an author making their official debut here on the show. Now, my guest today is a nature enthusiast intrigued by stories of survival. As a child, she spent endless hours watching her older brother play apocalyptic video games such as Resident Evil and Silent Hill. For decades, she was afflicted with nightmares of zombie outbreaks and still is. And at the age of 20, she moved from her hometown in Ladner, British Columbia, to Tofino, British Columbia, where she enjoyed life on the rugged West Coast while often contemplating what if scenarios. Her love of hiking, surfing, and great outdoors inspired the setting for her debut series. She now resides in, I'm going to butcher this, and I apologize, viewers and listeners, Tsawwassen. I butchered that horribly. I apologize. With her husband, dog, and toddler, where she feels unsettled living among more people than trees, less than apocalyptic what if scenario should occur. And in this interview, viewers and listeners, we'll be talking about our author's debut series, Waves of Undead. So without further ado, everyone, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest today, author Rebecca Cuthbertson. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, Rebecca. I'm so excited to have you here. And I just have to say, first off, I love the artwork behind you. I imagine that is from the series.
Yes, that's correct. That's some character art I've recently commissioned.
Nice. Amazing. Amazing. So, before we dive into the interview, what's a little random fact that not a lot of people may know about you?
When I was a teenager, I learned the alphabet backwards. I can't do it very well anymore, but I genuinely thought that was something that I would have to do on a regular basis. So,
Ooh, nice. Very, very nice. I don't think I can probably do that even now. I'm pretty sure I would get stumped. It may take me a while if I had it like in front of me and read it backwards, yes. But if I was to do it just from memory, I would probably struggle.
it's tricky. I get a few of them mixed up, but I got a little bit of it still.
Awesome. Okay. Now, this actually is a really cool one for me, Rebecca, because out of all the authors that I've had on the show thus far, I don't think I've ever had almost like zombie settings or zombie stories or apocalyptic settings in fiction appear on the show. So I'm very excited for this interview. And without spoiling too much of your series and your book, what can you tell us of Waves of Undead?
Yeah, so it's set in the Pacific Northwest, specifically in Tofino, Ladner, and Tsawwassen. They're all places that I have called home. And it layers the stakes by doubling down on the disasters. It pairs a zombie outbreak with a tsunami. So you've got that extra element of environmental danger.
Ooh, well, that is kind of terrifying. That is. I like it. I like it. So now, before we dive further into the creation of Ways of Undead, let's talk a little bit more about you, Rebecca. So, from your bio, you've always been fascinated with nature and, of course, a little bit of the apocalyptic setting. Your brother played some of the most famous games, Silent Hill, and, of course, Resident Evil. And again, from your bio, you were afflicted with nightmares and also still to this day. So, I'm very curious. When did you decide to take the intrigue of an apocalyptic setting and, zombie outbreaks and try your own hand at crafting your own type of story with those familiar elements?
Yeah, I don't remember an exact aha moment. I did start writing it in my early to mid 20s. It was an on again, off again project for about a
Mm.
decade before I published it. But living in the lower mainland in BC, it's what's known as Hollywood North. So there's a lot of filming that's done here and watching a lot of videos about the zombie genre and reading about the zombie genre typically takes place in like Atlanta, New York, LA, London, like all these big major cities internationally or in the States. And we don't see a lot of that here in Canada. So I wanted to bring about like, what would that look like here where I live? And also if it could eventually be a film adaptation, then, you know, instead of depicting these other cities, it's filming on location for that location. So
Ooh, okay. Now, you said that this was, an on again, off again project of yours that you've been working on for a while, but I'm also very curious. Was this the one that really sparked your interest in, writing stories, or had that passion existed prior?
I'd say this one really sparked the interest. I've always have had a love for storytelling, whether that be writing little film projects with friends or cosplaying and doing photo shoots like that. But I'd say this was the precipice for me being like, I want to be an author.
Nice. All right. So now let's actually dive into the behind the scenes of Waves of Undead. So let's start with a little icebreaker question for this. When you began writing the initial draft of Waves of Undead, what really surprised you about writing a zombie apocalypse that was trying to capture what we know about, zombie lore and zombie media, but have its own identity?
I think that it was hard to put like a unique spin because it's been done so many times, right? So it's hard to kind of find like how can I set this apart from other brilliant works within the genre. And so that's why I kind of went with layering the stakes, but also bringing it to like a Canadian audience.
Right. I definitely agree. And I've had something very similar with a lot of authors who write, a lot of paranormal stories with vampires, werewolves, and other creatures that go bump in the night because there's already lore written about them by other people. And you kind of do find that, similarity of, well, there's been so many things written about these types of characters that I'm probably not going to do anything that's, too out there, but maybe I can like create the world that these, creatures exist in that can really showcase the, again, similarities, but also a slight difference. So going forward from that, did you have a distinct outline that really helped with Waves of Undead, or would you consider yourself more of a pantser?
Definitely for Waves of Undead, I was more of a pantser. I think that's probably why it was on again, off again for about 10 years, because I had it initially where it's multi-point of view and follows many characters, but primarily a set of twins. And initially I had both the twins in Tofino, and then I had them both on the mainland, and I just kept changing it and changing it. So now I would say I'm a bit of both. I'm working on book 2 in the series, and I outlined the beginning of the novel and the end of the novel, and it's kind of the middle that I'm allowing myself to discover where the characters are going to take me along the way.
Nice. Very, very nice. And of course, when you finally got around to, making the commitment to write this book, fully finish it, and get it ready for publication, did you have a ritual or routine that kept you centered and grounded?
Yeah, I would always write before work in the morning. So I was working a 9 to 5 at the time, and I would wake up at like 4 or 5 a.m. to to write and then work out and, do my morning routine. So that was like my sacred time was early morning when everybody else was still asleep, and I would get it done. But now things look a little bit differently. I'm a stay-at-home mom. So now I'm working on book 2 literally on my cell phone, like thunder thumbs while my son is napping. And so ritual has
Awesome.
changed.
Definitely, definitely. You're definitely one among the authors that I've actually had the opportunity to meet, Rebecca, that are, the early writers, the early morning writers who just write, at 4 to like 6 to like, get those nice 2 hours in, because you're right. No one's up at that time. So it's a perfect opportunity to write. I can't do that. I'm more of a night owl when it comes to writing. I used to write early morning and afternoon, but I find myself more so, writing in the evening, and that works for me. And that's the thing about us writers. We're always going to have different routines that work best for us. And that is absolutely okay. And now, Rebecca, we have a fan question, which is going to be a few sprinkled throughout the interview. And this one is really good because this person is actually one of my commenters who is a big fan of the zombie genre. And they would like to know, and this may border on spoilers, so you can feel free to give as little as needed. But they would like to know, what was your favorite zombie death that you wrote in Waves of Undead?
Ooh, that is a great question. Um, I would have to say when my character Kat, she has like a big piece of driftwood stick and she's walking down the beach and she like impales him through the eye and just KOs him.
Nice. Okay. All right. And there's actually a follow-up to that question. And this one, it actually, I think, leads to a much more bigger discussion, which I think is really good. And that is, of course, well, context for this question. Much like with, vampires in media and fiction, there are so many different versions. You have the more modern vampires, you have the gothic vampires, you have the more supernatural with has magic. Zombies are no exception. You have, the classic George Romero zombies, you have the runners, you have the modern zombies, which are more, animalistic, World War Z zombies. I know a lot of people have a lot of comments on those types that they're more rabid humans, but they still follow or fit into that category of zombies. And of course, the 28 Days series, those zombies have definitely changed as well. So another fan question that one of my commenters would like to know is, when writing the zombies, what type of zombies did you want to write in your series?
Yeah, so most of my zombies are the slow ones. There are exceptions to that, though. So I'll explore in book 2 why, but there is a couple. One specific, his name is Rocket. One specifically, he's kind of highlighted throughout the book, and you see him as a human first and then turn into a zombie. And he's like super turbo speed, like he's running after you. He's climbing up ladders. You do not want to get caught in his crosshairs because he's going to take you down. But yeah, so my outbreak is caused by a vial that washes up on the beach, and people come in contact with this substance that's in the vial. And so it's not like a parasite, it's more of a bacteria kind of within this vial. But we'll explore that more in book 2 as well, the cause and whether there's a cure. And
nice. Okay. Very, very cool. And now, when you were writing this series, on and off again over, a 10-year period, and then finally finishing the book, ultimately looking back, what was your initial goal you had for this book as well as the series? And of course, the promise you're making, not just to yourself, but your readers and fans of the zombie genre.
Yeah, so I wanted to be able to provide just like a roller coaster of entertainment. And it really is that. Like my chapters are what are called potato chip chapters. So they're about 1 to 6 pages. So they're super punchy and fast paced. It's easy to, put down if you need to go to sleep and you want to get to the end of the chapter, but it's also very easy to binge through. And most of those chapters end on cliffhangers.
Ooh.
So it's like, it's just, you want to keep going, and it's super tense. You might laugh, you might cry, you're probably going to cringe at a couple of the gorier zombie scenes, but ultimately I want you to just be able to get immersed in this world and have a good time and hopefully get a little scared along the way.
Okay, all right. And now, kind of going to the realm of characters, Rebecca, as we know in, zombie media and zombie lore, there are certain archetype characters that exist in zombie media. You have the leader, you have sort of like the person, the MacGyver, as I like to call them, who can just make anything into weapons. You have the rapscallion, the semi-traitor, and so many other types of character types in zombie lore and in zombie fiction. So for your series in particular, Rebecca, how did you ensure that the characters presented in your story were authentic in the sense that it makes sense for them to exist in a zombie apocalypse?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this book, it takes place like the first 24 hours of the initial outbreak. So we haven't really had time yet to see them in more of that society has crumbled setting. They're just at the reaction and trying to survive what's initially going down. We do have characters who are demonstrating their ability to show their resourcefulness. We have characters who are hunters who are, they've got equipment at home that they're going to try to survive with. Um, we've got twin protagonists who are trying to maintain contact throughout the story. And yeah, we'll see more of those typical like dystopian archetypes shine through as the series progresses.
Okay. Now, do you have a favorite character that you've enjoyed writing in the series, as well as a favorite scene?
Yeah, for favorite character, that would have to be Skylar. He was also a favorite amongst my beta readers. He's just a super like fun-loving guy, gives great bear hugs. He likes to have beers around the campfire and go surfing. And yeah, I think that he would be a really good friend, and he's very resourceful. So he would be a good person to have on your survival team. And
Ooh.
then
Okay.
as far as favorite scene to write, surfing of the tsunami. That was
Ooh.
pretty wild.
Nice. Very, very nice. And that actually kind of goes into another fan question for this particular interview. And one of my commenters would like to know, since as you mentioned before that, this is a blend of two different genres. You have the zombie apocalypse and of course, the nature apocalypse with the tsunami. How did you balance the two in the sense that they work in joining together as opposed to, it's a zombie apocalypse and there's a tsunami, like it's two separate things?
Mhm. So it's a matter of trying to avoid the water while trying to survive the zombies. So the zombie outbreak happens to find its way to multiple areas in the Tofino where the tsunami happens. And so there's these groups of survivors who are initially hiding from the tsunami. And then that's when the zombies start to pop up. And so they're having to flee this place where they're seeking refuge on high ground.
Mm.
So you do see in some scenes a combination of characters trying to survive both simultaneously, where they're, rafting down a flooded highway and zombies are trying to pull them in and things like that. So it's, yeah, a fun extra layer to that.
Nice. Awesome. And kind of another, lead into the reflective questions, Rebecca. I'm very curious. Now, when you finished writing the initial draft of this book, what was the reaction like from friends and family? And the reason I bring this up is that, as authors, there is that hesitancy to let people know that we are authors and to claim ownership that, we are storytellers. Usually we tell people early on, others towards, the end of publication. I've had a lot of authors who have been on differing sides of this discussion. So I'd like to hear for you, Rebecca, how that moment came about for you.
Yeah, so as you say, like it is a very vulnerable thing to share your writing with somebody and to put it out into the world. I'm very blessed and lucky to have had the positive reaction side of the category from my friends and family. Like throughout the project, I did share with people that I was writing and had intentions to publish eventually and hopefully make a film adaptation eventually. But so I did have a lot of support from my friends and family along the way and asking, oh, how's your writing going? And even if I'd sheepishly answer, oh, I haven't written in 6 months. And yeah, people would still check in on it. And especially my mom, she was a huge support for me. She kept consistently asking me, how's this going? How's this going? I didn't touch it for over a year after my son was born. And finally,
Mm.
she's like, it's get it going. And was really immensely supportive throughout that. And sharing it with her was pretty vulnerable too, because like, okay, I'm writing stuff that's violent and gory and graphic, and I'm a pretty kind-hearted person. So to show people that side of me is it was weird, but it was very well received.
That's awesome. That is really, really awesome to hear. And kind of now going forward into the reflective questions, this one is probably a very loaded question. So I'm going to give some context for this. So, as authors, especially in the digital age, it has significantly changed the playing field. I mean, social media is a huge tool for us authors, especially, small press and indie authors, as well as hybrid authors. Trad authors are still the dominant force, which is, good for them. And something that I've learned, after doing these interviews now for about now going on to 4 years now, and being an author myself, going into my fifth year of being a writer, is that it's never been more easier to publish, but it's never been more difficult to market oneself. And one thing I have learned, and I've especially learned from doing these interviews with all the fellow authors that been on the show, is that the one thing that is apparent when it comes to being authors in the digital age is writer's block is significantly heightened because it's tied to social media, because everyone's expecting, when's the book coming out, when's the next one coming out, is it going to be a sequel, if there's going to be a spin-off, what have you. Like, there's going to be some expectations people have, especially from our fans. And secondly, imposter syndrome is heightened to a degree that is unheard of. It is unnerving, and it can make a person, want to stop writing altogether. I've had a lot of people on the show who have said that they were contemplating about never being writers ever again because it was just too much. Now, it varies from person to person, but generally there have been those moments. So ultimately, Rebecca, the question I pose to you is this. With all that said regarding writer's block, imposter syndrome, social media, what has disciplined you to still be the author that you start out as and will continue to be down the road?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I'm 36 in a couple weeks, and I worked a lot of jobs that I hated, that were soul sucking, and and I just always had this dream that I wanted to live a creative life. And I feel like I'm finally following that path, and I'm the only one who can do that for myself. Nobody else is going to do it for me. So I think that in order to work past the imposter syndrome, in order to work past the writer's block, you have to just remember why you're doing it, and that you have something to say and to share with the world, and yeah, to live like your most authentic life possible. And not to say that I'm by any means like supporting my livelihood on my writing yet, but that is ultimately the goal.
Yes, every author wants to reach that point where we can live off of our success. That is the dream. And it's a very, very, it's not an impossible dream. It is possible, but it's a lot of hard work and dedication.
Mhm.
And this kind of goes into another question, well, more so of a debate that I've been seeing. And I'll give some more context for this question. So, when I began my writing, it was around the height of the pandemic, 2020. And I began writing just to escape, the boredom that was surrounding me. I was in my graduate program from San Francisco, had to go back to Southern California to complete it. Ultimately went back for the last 6 months, but still a majority of my education was remote. And the only thing to keep me busy was, writing. And in the process, I got 4 books finished in the initial phase and then published within a year of each other. And as I was also doing my interviews at the time, I realized that, a lot of authors have been around or have been doing the same thing. They all began their careers around 2020. And then, looking back, I realized that there was this huge plethora of indie creatives just waiting to be explored. And then, of course, the floodgates open and the market soon became saturated, if not oversaturated, with new authors. And that was amazing. And a lot of people, including myself, believe that we are in a golden age of indie authors. But as time has gone by and new things have come about, especially with the rise of generative AI taking center stage and kind of mass producing a false sense of creativity, this has made me wonder, are we still in a golden age or have we transitioned into an iron age? And by iron age, I mean a separation of those who want to be in the industry and grow and have a career, as opposed to those who simply wrote stories to make a quick buck. Because I'm sure you'll definitely agree, Rebecca, being an author is not a quick, rich money scheme. It's not. You realistically, no one is going to live off of the royalties of one's books. You would have to at least write 7, if not 20 books to be considered a financial success. And writing that many books, that is a commitment. That is a dedication. But ultimately, the question I pose to you is this: from your own experiences and from what you have seen, on social media and possibly from other authors that you have had the opportunity to meet in person or virtual and build those connections, do you believe that we are still in a golden age or have we transitioned into this iron age period?
I think that we're still in a golden age, at least I'd like to believe so. There are so many different platforms and opportunities for indie authors to be able to create their works. And you can put, a couple $100 into it or thousands of dollars. There's so many nuances and so many layers to how you can go about this craft, and it truly is like a choose your own adventure. So it's incredible that way. So I like to think of it as a golden age that way. When it comes to people using AI to create and kind of just making a quick buck, as you say, I'm hoping that that will plateau and ebb off. People will realize, this is not to the same quality of these people who are putting their heart and soul and countless hours into their works. And people can already identify when they're reading these works that this doesn't sound as human. Like it doesn't have those special elements that human writers do. So I think that people might be dabbling in it now, but hopefully that will taper off and they'll just let the rest of us shine.
Absolutely, 100%. And I would like to take a little bit more time to talk about generative AI because it has changed the game for, the publishing industry. I've seen a lot of posts on social media talking about, AI and the dangers it is. And I have definitely seen, what it could do. And I am a fervent, I should say, adamant that AI has no place in the writing process, but I can also acknowledge that AI is used in everything, including spell check, which is, of course, AI, and we can't get rid of it. But generative AI, we do have control over. And I would like to hear your thoughts on whether or not there is some use for generative AI in the publishing world. And to give an example, a lot of my colleagues, especially those that are not fiction-based authors, but more of like academic published authors, argue that you could use generative AI for brainstorming and gathering of ideas. Do you think that is probably one good example of using generative AI? Because while it does gather the information for you, you are now responsible for writing the content.
I think that it could be used as a valuable tool that way in the right hands, but to not, use it lazily where you're letting it do all the work for you. Like, you hear about these kids who are doing tests and they write the prompt and then they copy and paste it and they're not doing any work. They don't remember what they're doing and you're not learning anything from that. And that's a huge part of the process when we're writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, is learning from what we're doing. And yeah, I think that it's a double-edged sword. There are a lot of things that it could be used for good. However, at the point we're at now, there's environmental impacts and impacts to people's health that we're finding out. So I think that if they're able to make it so it's an environmentally sound tool for people to use that doesn't replace human creativity, then it could be quite beneficial. But where it's at right now, I think that it could be quite harmful.
Very true. Very, very true. And definitely one thing I will just finally say is that using generative AI to write your content, in the words of a guest that I had on the show, it's like asking an alcoholic to write the story for you. It's not going to make sense. It's going to be jumbled all over the place. And ultimately, you're going to be an editor. You're not going to be the writer. You're going to be the editor. And you're going to have to edit frequently to make sure it makes sense. And marketing the book that's generative AI, it's not going to be easy because people are going to tell. I mean, I remember a year ago, and I'm sure you may have heard of this story, Rebecca, of a popular book that was on Amazon that was pulled because it had at the back of the page a prompt that said, oh, this book was written in with generative AI to be in the style of so-and-so. When I heard that, I laughed internally. It's like, oh my goodness, like, how did you not see? Like, did you not think of getting rid of that page? And it's just so crazy. But tying into now the business side of being an author, that's the thing. We don't know how to market our books because, as I said earlier, it's easy to get published because there's so many platforms, but it's a pain to market because we don't know how to market ourselves. We don't know how to make ads. We don't know how to have like good PR and everything like that. So as a good icebreaker question for this segment, Rebecca, when you finished writing and getting Waves of Undead published, how did you go about marketing it? And as you write book 2 in this series, is there anything that you wish you'd done differently for book 1 that you will be doing now for book 2 when you get to that point?
Yeah, so most of my online footprint is on Instagram. I'm on TikTok a little bit and Threads, but I'd say most of my marketing just comes from Instagram posts, reels and stuff like that. So I like using the trope trees and doing like silly little skits and stuff. I do something called Survival Sundays where I'm learning survival skills in order to protect my family in case a zombie apocalypse occurs. So, tying that into my umbrella of I'm a zombie apocalypse writer. But to be honest, I have more sales at in-person events than I do online. So I do a lot of craft fairs, farmers markets, things like that here in the Lower Mainland. And I'd say like connecting face-to-face with readers has been my number one marketing strategy. So I have the big signs and it says Tofino, zombies, tsunami. Need I say more? And that has been like my number one marketing thing, just that tagline alone, because people see that. They know Tofino is Canada's surfing capital. They go, zombies, tsunami, like what is this about? And then they approach my table. So yeah, that has been kind of my core marketing.
Nice.
And sorry, what was the second part of the question again?
Oh, yes. The second part of the question was, so with that said of what you've done for, book 1, is there anything that you would be doing differently or wish you would do differently as you go into book 2?
Yeah, so I'm finally investing in some character art. So rather than doing that almost a year after publication, I'll try to do that before publication for book 2, so I can kind of use that for my promotional posts and get the hype up that way. Because I know that I'm drawn to character art myself when other people are advertising theirs. I'm also just trying to learn about using hooks when you're making your reels and your posts and stuff like that. Just trying to do a deep dive on like my own social media marketing because there's so much to learn, so many nuances. And as I say, like most of my sales come from in person. So when we don't have farmers markets in the winter, I got to enter this more social media marketing mode. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Nice. All right. And now let's actually talk about probably one of the biggest things that a lot of authors struggle with is understanding and knowing who our audience is. So it seems to me, Rebecca, that for Waves of Undead, you definitely want to market to readers who enjoy, of course, the zombie genre and, of course, the apocalypse setting. But with that said, as I mentioned before, and zombie fiction is no exception to this, is that readers have a certain expectation of how a certain book is supposed to go. And when it comes to writing our own stories, it's this balance of author authenticity, but also being mindful of the genres that we are writing in. And it's a balancing act because you don't want to write something that's too familiar that people are going to say it's a knockoff version, but you don't want to write something that's too new that's going to throw people off and confuse them. And also, with that said, trying to realize, okay, we've written this book. Who exactly is our audience? What age group? Because I have been shocked to hear by a lot of authors on the show who have written books that have been for more of a adult audience, and some of their majority readers have been outside, if not younger, than their target audience. So ultimately, how have you been able to balance the two, your authenticity, but being mindful of the genres that you're writing in? And secondly, how difficult was it to really find your audience?
It is a challenge, to kind of determine who exactly you're writing to. Like, I started out writing this book for myself, but yeah, looking at your sort of ideal reader archetype, I would say that I have two. So the first being, as you say, somebody who likes to read zombie and apocalyptic fiction.
Mm.
And the second being anybody who's kind of geographically local, because that local setting has had quite a pull. Like, I've had somebody locally who said to me, I haven't read a book in 20 years, but I'm going to pick yours up because it's got Ladner in it. So, seeing that is really cool. But yeah, I would say, it's, if I had to like pinpoint somebody, I have a friend who I went to high school with who's like a gamer. He also goes to Tofino and surfs. So when I think about who I'm writing for, I think like, would he like that? He has no idea. I should probably tell him because he did buy a copy of my book. But yeah, I kind of think about him and like, okay, he's probably wants, I don't know where I'm going with this. Sorry.
You're good.
But yeah, as far as like genre expectations go, I'd say, I've got a lot of layers to this novel. Like, there are romantic subplots. There's a couple of various love triangles. There's, that element of the tsunami and the natural disaster. But for genre expectations, I'm upholding them and not holding back on throwing the punches, because I've got a lot of people who go down in this book that it might surprise people, including a main character. So yeah. No holding back.
Awesome. All right. All right. And now we're actually going to go. Well, before we get into the rapid fire questions, there was another question I did want to ask you, which I think is important to note. And that is, of course, networking. Because for us authors, networking is very, very, very important. And I would like to hear your experiences with networking. And if you could name drop and give shout outs to some of the people that have helped you in your career as an author.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been an immensely supportive community that I've found mostly on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. So some of the friends that I've made with fellow authors there are Roger Sandry, Author Zombie X, Glenn Weatherhead, J.R. Carter, Anthony Stanton. And then on TikTok, Josh Rice has been great, and really loved connecting with him on my works. And yeah, it's definitely important to make connections with fellow authors so you can, hype each other up, share each other's posts, talk about the craft and the frustrations and this and that. Because, I can talk to my husband or my mom or my best friend about like this frustration, but it's different when you're not in it, right? So being able to connect with others is very important. And I've I have met a lot of other authors local to me at my markets that I attend and stuff. Yeah, so I've been trying to maintain contact, but it is hard to do it all.
Absolutely, 100%. And if I'm not mistaken, I think J.R. Carter is also a Wandering Scribe alumni here on the channel. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I think he also name dropped you in his interview as well. I have to go back and see it, but JR, if you're watching this, please let me know. Comment down below. I want to make sure that I actually get this right. But yes, absolutely, you are correct, Rebecca, that it is very helpful to be in a community of people who understand the hustle and bustle of being author. So I can just reset. Well, Rebecca, you're absolutely correct. As authors, it is very nice to be in a community of people who, share the same things and understand what it means to, be an author, especially in the digital age. And I definitely think networking should be a vital tool for every creative to use, because especially if you're an indie, it's not easy because everything's out of pocket. It's all about balancing finances, and it really helps ease the workload when you know people that you can rely and count on to help you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the character art behind you, is that actually someone that's actually within your inner circle?
So they are artists that I've found on Threads and Instagram. So we have Moss Likes Rum, Pandiel's Art, and Cran Medina. So they can all be found on Instagram. Yeah, and I highly recommend working with any of them. They did fantastic.
Nice. Amazing. Amazing, Rebecca. And now we're going to go into the rapid fire segment of the interview, which is probably one of my favorite mini segments. So the first rapid fire question is, which of the five senses, the five physical senses specifically, in your opinion, is the most difficult to emulate in storytelling?
Oh, the most difficult. Maybe touch. It's hard to emulate without getting repetitive.
Definitely. Touch and smell have been like the biggest two that have been here on the channel. All right. Next one. Themes or tropes in story?
For writing, I like themes better. I don't share like all of the tropes on my little like trope map thing that I use for social media, because I find a lot of them would be spoilers. In my novel in particular, that's not the case for everybody, but yeah, I prefer writing to theme myself.
All right.
I saw somebody post that shared body heat for survival was an underrated trope, and I just want to shout out that I have that in my novel.
Ooh, I don't think I've heard that one.
Yeah. I'm so stumped. Sorry.
You're fine. I can tell you a lot of people have been stumped on this question. That and another one on the interview.
Yeah. I'm totally at a blank. Sorry.
It's okay. I think in terms of the most overrated that I've heard a lot of people have said is the enemies to lovers is probably one of the most overrated tropes in fiction, because almost every piece of literature, piece of fiction has that in it.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I don't mind that one myself, but it is definitely recycled quite frequently.
Definitely. And then this one is more so like they call the mixed media flash questions. Now, as you mentioned earlier in the interview, that is one of your hopes and dreams that Waves of Undead gets adapted into a film down the road. With that in mind, there's going to be two different questions applied to this topic. if your book was adapted into a film, who would you want to direct it? And secondly, and this is probably a little tricky, from the main characters, you can give like the first three. Who would you want to play them?
That's so hard. So who would I want to direct it in an ideal world where there's no financial restraints? I would love to see myself, my cousin, and her husband direct it. We've
Ooh, okay.
been actually working on some film projects recently, and have kind of a little indie film thing going on that we're hoping will be released next year or later this year. So if that was something that we could undertake in the future, I think that that would be incredible. And as far as my dream casting would go, Anna, if so, she's around 25, and I know that she's a bit older now, but when I was first writing it, I thought that it would be really fun to have Jennifer Lawrence cast as her.
Okay.
Yeah, and then for present day, I don't have him there, but Harvey, I think that no, not present day. Actually, this would have been about 10 years ago when I started writing to Colin O'Donoghue for Harvey.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, he's a great actor. And I have so many characters, so it's hard to pinpoint. But those were the two that I've definitely like dreamt about in the past.
Okay, all right. And the second question, kind of within this film media style, if your film had a original song or a theme song of your choice, what would it be?
So one of the songs that I listened to quite a bit while writing, and I actually mention it in the book, was Heart of the Sea by Flogging Molly.
Ooh, I don't think I've heard that one. I'll have to go and check that out.
Yeah, it's a great listen.
Nice, nice. And now here is the next rapid fire question. This one's a little bit difficult. In your opinion, when a writer reaches the very end, which is more difficult to accept? When a story is finished or when to stop writing?
Yeah, that's tough. When a story is finished or when to stop writing. I think it's hard to determine like when to stop writing. Like I knew when my story was finished and it is on a bit of a cliffhanger. So sorry if people don't like that. But yeah, being in a series, I had to do it. But yeah, I knew once I wrote that line, this is where I got to make the cutoff point. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going and going and going. But yeah, it can be a really hard thing to determine because just like, you know, when you're doing a painting or any kind of artistic expression, it's like, when is it done? You can just keep adding layers and elements and stuff. So yeah, it's a fine art to pinpoint that moment.
Right. And then this is a very old question that I've turned into a rapid fire, and I used it sparingly in different interviews, but this is a scenario-based question. So as you mentioned earlier that you go to a lot of in-person events to promote your book, I want you to imagine this. Let's say you have been invited to join a panel of authors, and you're there maybe with 5 other people in a crowd of maybe a good 50 to almost close to 100 people in this little stadium auditorium. And you're being asked multiple questions throughout the whole discussion. And the moderator asks each of you this important question. And that question is, what would your advice be to authors that want to get into this industry from your own personal experiences?
I would say, you know, see it through. It's really hard to finish a project that is, you know, it's so many hours in the making, hundreds or thousands, but just, you know, keep going. And, you know, as they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You just have to take those steps, do 100 words, do a chapter, just keep going and see it through. And the sense of fulfillment once you have finished a project that's, thousands, tens and thousands of words or hundreds of thousands of words is there's no other feeling like it. And to be able to express yourself and share that story with the world, it's so worthwhile. So keep going.
Absolutely. Very, very true. And I think the one I've shared on the show also is that don't be afraid to acknowledge. One of my advices that I was asked this question before on my own panel is don't be afraid to accept the notion that your debut novel is not going to be the start of your legacy. That is completely fine. Because you know what? For me, and using myself as an example, most people know me for my third book, Michael, Last Angel of Earth. They don't know me as the author of The Gathering being my first book. And that is completely fine. There is going to be that book that is going to be our name holder, a name placer in the world, and that is completely fine. It is okay to accept that because it's not a reflection of ourselves as people. And I think it also be another piece of advice is never combine your self-worth with the financial success of your book. If you do that, you're going to be absolutely miserable and it will destroy you.
Yeah, well said.
Mm-hmm. And then before we end this amazing interview, Rebecca, to cap off this amazing discussion, what do you want readers and our viewers to really take away from your book as well as the future of the Waves of Undead series?
Yeah, I think it's it's being in a local setting. To me, it's a way to look at like what would you do if, as we discussed in my bio. It all started with these what would you do if scenarios. So, if you're reading this book for enjoyment, which I hope you do, take away a little piece of that what would you do if and apply it to your own home, your own emergency preparedness, your own city. Look at maps and escape routes, or not to sound like I'm some major prepper, because I'm not, but yeah, it's just good to think about those things sometimes.
Absolutely, 100%. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we conclude this amazing, incredible author interview on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to Rebecca for coming on the show, making her official debut, and hopefully not her last appearance on the show. Now, Rebecca, where can people find you on social media as well as purchase a copy of your book, Waves of Undead? And are you going to be doing any in-person events later this year?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram, but I'm also on Threads and TikTok. And my handle is rcuthbertson.writes. And then to get a copy of my book, you can go to rcuthbertsonwrites.com, or I'm also on Amazon, Kindle, KU. And as far as in-person events goes, I do have lots of farmers markets that I'm just waiting to put a calendar together for. So that information I'll definitely share on social media as well as my website.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. And if you'd like to see Rebecca back on the show for a follow-up interview or possibly an episode of the Writers Hub, make sure to like this video, comment down below, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with upcoming interviews, book reviews, and many more to come. And on that note, everyone, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Happy Friday, everybody, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Take care and have a wonderful day.